The sun, a nascent ember, painted the eastern sky in hues of ochre and rose as Ranger Thabo's Land Rover rumbled across the vast savanna. Dust plumed behind him, a golden cloud in the crisp morning air. This was his sanctuary, his life's calling. The rhythm of routine patrols ingrained in his bones, each sunrise a familiar, comforting promise. He navigated the worn tracks, the hum of the engine a counterpoint to the distant calls of francolins and the rustle of tall grass. Then the world tilted. Ahead, where the track narrowed between two colossal acacias, a shape materialized, utterly still, utterly defiant. Asha, a lioness of formidable reputation, queen of this territory, stood directly in his path. Her usually proud stance was subtly askew, her breathing shallow, but her resolve was absolute. She wasn't just observing, she was blocking. Thabo braked, the jeep shuddering to a halt a safe distance away. His hand instinctively hovered over the radio, a protocol ingrained from years of training. Observe, report, maintain distance. But as Asha's molten amber eyes locked onto his, the rules seemed to dissolve. There was an urgency in her gaze, a profound, almost human intelligence that transcended instinct, pleading with a silent language only Thabo seemed privy to. It was an impossible summons. From the rustling fortress of the tall grass behind her, three small, fragile forms stumbled into view. Lion cubs, their tiny bodies too thin, too weak, clung to Asha's injured flank, their eyes wide-eyed and vulnerable. The sight was a punch to Thabo's gut. Asha shifted, a barely perceptible tremor running through her powerful frame, and in that movement Thabo saw it, a grotesque swelling on her left foreleg, a deep, festering wound that had clearly compromised her ability to hunt, to protect. This wasn't just an injured animal, this was a mother, desperate and dying, laying bare her ultimate vulnerability before him. His mind reeled. The park's non-interference policy was sacrosanct. Nature takes its course, even in its cruelest forms. Yet, how could he turn away from this? The implicit trust in Asha's eyes, the stark helplessness of her cubs, pulled at something primal within him, tearing at the fabric of his professional resolve. Duty warred with a burgeoning, dangerous compassion. A low, guttural chittering reached him from the periphery, a sound that always curdled the blood. Hyenas. Shadows flickered at the edge of his vision, coalescing into gaunt forms, their eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. They had caught the scent of weakness, of blood, of an easy meal. Asha's ears twitched, her head snapping towards the approaching scavengers. Then back to Thabo, her gaze now a stark, commanding demand. The hyena's cackles grew louder, closer, echoing the frantic beat of Thabo's own heart. "She's asking for help," Thabo whispered, the words catching in his throat, a confession to the silent, watchful Savannah. Every fiber of his training screamed against it, but the image of those tiny cubs, the raw agony in Asha's eyes, rendered protocol meaningless. This wasn't an animal anymore. It was a soul. With a surge of adrenaline, Thabo slammed the gear stick into drive. The jeep lurched forward. He floored the accelerator, the engine roaring, and leaned on the horn, a guttural blast that ripped through the morning silence. It was an act of pure, irrational aggression. The hyenas, startled by the sudden, unexpected charge from what should have been an easy target, scattered in a chaotic flurry of yelps and retreating shadows. They melted back into the bush, their snarls fading into the distance. Asha watched their retreat, unblinking, her gaze steady, then fixed on Thabo once more. There was no relief in her eyes, only a chilling acknowledgement, an understanding of the precarious, unspoken pact they had just forged. Thabo killed the engine. The abrupt silence was heavier than any roar, pregnant with the gravity of his transgression. He had crossed a line, a barrier of human-wildlife interaction that had stood for generations. The consequences were unimaginable. Asha slowly, painfully, lowered herself to the dusty track. With a deliberate movement, she extended her injured leg towards him, the raw, angry wound starkly visible, as if offering proof, a fragile, desperate permission for him to approach. Thabo's hand trembled as he reached for the door handle, his world poised on the brink of an irreversible change. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that nothing would ever be the same again. Thabo's boots crunched on the dry earth, each step a reverberation of his own pounding heart. Every instinct, honed over years of living on the edge of the wild, screamed at him. Danger, retreat, this is madness. The vast, ancient weight of centuries of man versus wild pressed down on him. But Asha's unwavering gaze held him captive. She remained utterly still, her powerful muscles coiled and taut beneath her tawny fur, a living testament to a trust that defied all logic, all nature. He moved with painstaking slowness, lowering himself into a crouch a few feet from the lioness. From his well-worn medical kit, he carefully extracted a bottle of antiseptic and a roll of sterile bandages. The dart gun lay unused in the jeep, a symbol of a protocol he'd just betrayed. A tool for containment he refused to deploy against this creature that had sought his help. He spoke in a low, strained whisper, more to himself than to the formidable animal before him. Easy, Asha. Easy now. With a trembling hand he reached out, the air thick with the scent of wild animal and impending danger. His fingers gently pressed the antiseptic-soaked cotton to the raw, festering wound on her foreleg. Asha flinched, a low, rumbling growl emanating from deep within her chest, a primal warning. Thabo froze, his breath catching, acutely aware of the power that could easily end his life. But then, as quickly as it had come, the growl subsided, replaced by a tense, focused stillness. She tolerated his touch, a silent battle raging within her as he worked. Easy, Asha, he murmured again, his voice barely audible, pushing through the visceral fear that prickled his skin. As he meticulously cleaned the infected flesh, his fingers brushed against something hard, sharp, and utterly foreign embedded deep within the muscle. He probed gently, a jolt of ice water through his veins. It wasn't bone or splintered wood. With a careful, almost surgical precision, he worked it free. It was a small, jagged piece of metal, dark and tarnished, too smooth in one place, too sharp in another. Undeniably man-made, not a natural accident, not a territorial skirmish. This was from a snare, a trap, designed with malicious intent. Thabo's jaw clenched, a cold dread seeping into him, displacing the fear of the lioness with something far more insidious. This isn't just an accident. It was a deliberate act, a silent declaration of human trespass. A poacher, or worse. The implications were immediate, chilling. This wasn't just a sick animal, it was evidence. Without a moment's hesitation, a swift, agonizing decision crystallizing in his mind, Thabo curled his fingers around the metallic fragment, concealing it in his palm. He wouldn't report this. He couldn't. To report it meant involving protocol, investigations, and likely Asha's capture or worse, putting the cubs at further risk. He had made his choice, and now he was complicit, bound by a dangerous secret. He finished bandaging the leg, the white gauze a stark contrast against her golden fur, a crude but effective barrier against the dust and insects. It was a human touch, an impossible kindness bestowed upon a creature of the wild. Asha lifted her head, her amber eyes locking onto his once more. There was a profound, unreadable depth in her gaze, a silent acknowledgement that seemed to pierce through his deception, understanding the forbidden knowledge he now carried. The cubs, sensing the shift in the air, nudged tentatively at her flank, their tiny, almost imperceptible cries a stark reminder of the fragile lives hanging in the balance, of the immense stakes of his actions. Thabo slowly retreated, backing away from the lioness and her brood, the metallic fragment, a burning secret in his pocket. He climbed back into his jeep, the cabin suddenly feeling small, confining. He started the engine, the familiar rumble no longer comforting. As he drove away, leaving Asha and her cubs behind, the savannah no longer felt like his sanctuary. It was charged now, not just with the primal energy of the wild, but with a looming, unseen human threat, a conspiracy he had inadvertently stepped into, irrevocably changing his world. Words, 870 days dissolved into a blur of sun-baked dust and crackling heat, but Thabo's vigilance never wavered. Each morning patrol became a covert search, his eyes scanning the horizon not for routine, but for a familiar tawny form. The image of Asha and her cubs, and the metallic fragment hidden in his pocket, had become an unwelcome obsession, a burning secret that distanced him from his colleagues and his established life. He finally spotted her by the shimmering river flats a few mornings later. His heart sank. Despite his intervention, her limp was still pronounced, a testament to the severity of the wound. The cubs, though cleaner, still moved with a fragile weakness that tugged at his conscience. His fears were confirmed. Asha was still struggling. The crackle of the radio broke the tense silence. "Ranger Thabo, you're holding stationary for an unusual duration. Everything all right out there?" It was Musa, his colleague, a stickler for protocol. Thabo's mouth felt dry. "Just a mechanical check, Musa. Slight issue with the differential. Should be moving shortly." The lie tasted like ash, a heavy weight that settled deeper into his gut, further solidifying his isolation and personal risk. "I can't tell them," he muttered under his breath, watching Asha, the words an affirmation of the dangerous path he was now walking. Then, from the deceptive calm of the tall grass, they emerged again. Hyenas. More numerous this time, bolder, their guttural laughter carrying on the wind. They had likely returned, drawn by the lingering scent of weakness, by the memory of easy prey, having learned that the jeep, though loud, was not a direct predator to be feared. Asha, exhausted and still faltering, braced herself, her remaining strength coiled to defend her cubs, a battle she could not possibly win alone. Thabo's hand instinctively went to the glove compartment, his fingers closing around the cold, unfamiliar metal of the old flare gun. A rarely used tool, an act of last resort in dire emergencies, never against wild animals, certainly not for personal intervention. "This will draw too much attention," he agonized. The thought of the inevitable questions, the breach of every park regulation, a suffocating fear. But the sight of Asha's valiant, doomed defiance, the vulnerability of her tiny cubs, overrode all rational thought, all protocol. He flung open the jeep door, the sound startling the hyenas momentarily. He stepped out, exposing himself, raising the flare gun high. Asha's amber eyes, fixed on him, seemed to hold a flicker of understanding, an implicit command. With a violent hiss and a burst of crimson light, the flare blasted skyward, a screaming meteor tearing through the morning. The hyenas yelped, shattering in every direction, their predatory advance broken by the sudden, fiery assault. As the echoes of the blast faded and the last of the scavengers disappeared, Asha gave a distinct chuff, a soft, rumbling exhalation, a unique sound of acknowledgement. She lowered her powerful head slightly, a profound gesture that Thabo interpreted, perhaps impossibly, as gratitude. It was a moment of profound, unsettling connection. Fueled by this impossible bond and a gnawing suspicion, Thabo began a discreet off-patrol search. He couldn't shake the image of the metallic shard. Who would set a trap here, in a protected zone? He retraced his route to the general area where he had first encountered Asha. Away from the main tracks, obscured by dense bush, he found them. Faint, deep tire tracks, unlike the familiar tread of park vehicles. They were wider, heavier, indicating an unauthorized, robust vehicle. Trampled brush, recently disturbed, hinted at recent heavy activity, a deliberate attempt at concealment. "Someone's been here. Someone who doesn't want to be found," he concluded, the words chilling him. The trap wasn't random. It was a deliberate act, a signpost in a hidden landscape. The metallic fragment in his pocket, a silent, damning piece of evidence, felt heavier than ever, pulling him deeper into a conspiracy he was only just beginning to uncover. As dust draped its violet cloak over the savannah, Thabo covertly loaded his jeep. Stronger antiseptic, more robust bandages, a small evidence collection kit he usually reserved for rare, authorized forensic work. This was a solo, unsanctioned mission, driven by the metallic fragment in his pocket and the relentless questions churning in his mind about Asha's injury. Under the cold, indifferent gaze of the moon, he found them by the river. Asha, a silhouette of primal strength and vulnerable motherhood, and her 3 tiny cubs. Her growl was a low, rumbling vibration, a cautious acceptance rather than aggression, a sound that both thrilled and unnerved Thabo. He knelt, the gritty sand cool beneath his knees, and gently re-examined her leg. The wound was healing, a testament to his earlier intervention, But the jagged scar of the trap was undeniably man-made, a brutal testament to human cruelty. Then an unprecedented act unfolded. Asha shifted, her powerful flank brushing against one of her cubs, nudging it gently forward, towards Thabo. The cub, a ball of fluffy curiosity and apprehension, hesitated, then took a tentative step. It sniffed at Thabo's outstretched, open palm, a moment of profound, impossible trust that transcended the boundaries of species. A wave of awe washed over him. She wants me to know, he thought, the silent understanding passing between them, a heavier weight than any fear. This was more than gratitude. It was an intelligence that spoke volumes. As Thabo carefully withdrew his hand and straightened, his gaze fell upon a small, camouflage item partially buried in the damp sand near the water's edge. It was a discarded trigger mechanism from a trap, sophisticated, unlike any poacher's crude snare he'd ever seen. Its design was complex, a series of tiny gears and finely machined components, hinting at engineering, not improvisation. This wasn't a random hunting trap, it was a device of precision. Nearby, a faint metallic odor permeated the air, subtle but distinct. He leaned closer, noticing an unusual, almost iridescent sheen on the water's edge, where the river met the bank. His ranger training screamed at him. Chemical residue. "This isn't just a poacher's snare," he whispered, the truth dawning on him, chilling him to the bone. This was an advanced, high-tech operation, not just crude animal cruelty. The chemical residue suggested an environmental impact, a toxic byproduct. It elevated the severity of Asha's injury from a simple poaching incident to something far grander, far more sinister. With deliberate care, Thabo used his evidence kit to collect samples of the shimmering residue, and then, using a small shovel, he carefully excavated the discarded trap component, pocketing both. He now had undeniable proof of organized human danger, a threat far beyond what he initially conceived. Asha's injury wasn't just random collateral damage. She was caught in the crossfire of a scheme far more elaborate and potentially devastating. The cubs mewed softly, their innocent cries a stark counterpoint to the darkness Thabo was uncovering, a fragile reminder of what he was fighting for. Who would do this? And why? He questioned, the silent vastness of the savannah offering no answers. He knew with a certainty that made his stomach clench that he had stumbled onto a major human intrusion in the wild, an operation designed to remain hidden. He retreated, leaving Asha and her cubs to the quiet moonlight, burdened by the chilling evidence and a new, perilous resolve. The sanctuary was under siege, and he was now its unlikely, solitary defender. If you're gripped by this story, imagine what's coming next. The stakes are about to skyrocket, and Ranger Thabo is in immediate, life-threatening danger. Don't miss a single beat of this unraveling conspiracy. Make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the shocking conclusion. Back in the secluded confines of his cabin, away from prying eyes and the ubiquitous park radio, Thabo meticulously laid out his meager evidence. Under a portable microscope, the trap component revealed itself as a marvel of chilling efficiency. It was clearly custom-made, bearing no recognizable serial numbers or manufacturing marks, yet its intricate design spoke of advanced engineering, a precision far beyond any crude poaching device. Next, the chemical residue. The analysis, crude as it was with his limited equipment, pointed unmistakably to a synthetic compound, one not naturally occurring in the reserve. Its properties hinted at processes associated with illegal mining or aggressive resource extraction activities, operations that would utterly devastate this pristine environment. This wasn't just a localized problem. This was industrial-scale ecological warfare. Risking everything, Thabo fired up his hidden satellite phone, its signal bouncing off distant satellites, connecting him to encrypted forums and a network of off-grid environmental watchdogs. He cross-referenced his findings, typing furiously, the glow of the screen illuminating his tense face. The pieces began to click into place, forming a terrifying mosaic. Whispers, vague reports. A shadowy corporation, Ethel Resources, frequently surfaced in connection with illicit operations, resource exploitation, and environmental degradation across the continent, always operating just beyond the reach of the law. Ethel Resources, operating under the radar, he muttered, the name a chilling pronouncement. He was staring at a massive corporate cover-up, a deliberate assault on the wild. His investigation led him to an old, rarely patrolled sector of the reserve, a remote expanse known for its untouched mineral deposits. The park management had always deemed it too rugged, too insignificant to warrant regular surveillance. But Ethel Resources clearly thought differently. Deep within a ravine, cleverly concealed by thick canopy, Thabo found it, a hidden makeshift base camp. No permanent structures, but enough high-tech surveillance equipment to rival a small military outpost. Drill cores lay discarded, their geological samples extracted, and amongst the detritus, he found them. Small, specialized tracking devices, biomarkers, designed for inconspicuous attachment to wildlife. A cold dread seeped into him. The traps weren't just for animals, not solely for clearing the area. They were part of a sophisticated, multi-pronged operation. Perhaps to deter, yes, but the biomarkers, they were tracking the local wildlife, treating them as test subjects, monitoring the impact of their illegal activities. Or worse, guiding them towards specific controlled zones. The lions, they're not just victims. They're witnesses, he concluded. Asha's ordeal suddenly seen in a terrifying new light. Her wound wasn't just an accident, it was a consequence of a brutal, cold-blooded intrusion. She and her pride were mere obstacles, or perhaps unwilling participants in a grander, darker scheme. Further sifting through the discarded, encrypted communication logs he managed to partially decrypt, Thabo found chilling references. A classified incident, mention of suppressing local ranger reports, and manipulating environmental data. They weren't just poaching, they were systematically undermining the very infrastructure meant to protect the reserve, ensuring their operations remained hidden. Thabo's hands clenched. The agonizing decision was made. He could not ignore this. His career, his life, all were now on the line. He had to expose Ethel Resources. To walk away now would be to betray not just Asha, but every creature in the reserve, every principle he had ever stood for. They'll come for me, he knew, the thought a cold, stark certainty. But the image of Asha's amber eyes, of her 3 vulnerable cubs, of the pristine wilderness now threatened by an unseen hand, hardened his resolve, steeling him against the immense, perilous forces he was now up against. Thabo worked through the night in his cabin, the quiet hum of his laptop the only sound. He meticulously compiled his evidence. High-resolution photographs of the hidden camp, the discarded trap component, the chemical residue samples carefully bagged and labeled, and the damning, partially decrypted copies of Ethel Resources' incriminating documents. He had enough to blow their operation wide open, but he needed more on live evidence, an undeniable transmission from the heart of their illicit activity. Before dawn, armed with his camera, a portable satellite transmitter, and the weight of an entire ecosystem on his shoulders, he returned to the hidden camp. The air was still, pregnant with the false peace of the early morning. As he crept through the dense foliage toward the makeshift base, 2 figures materialized from the shadows, heavily armed, their faces grim. Operatives from Ethel Resources. They knew. "You've gone too far, Ranger," one of them snarled, raising a weapon, its cold metal glinting in the faint light. The air thickened with tension, the smell of fear and ozone. This was it. Suddenly, a low, powerful growl erupted from the dense bush directly behind the operatives, a sound that vibrated through the earth itself. Asha emerged, not alone, but with her entire pride. Several powerful lionesses, including her 2 older sisters, and a magnificent male, their eyes glowing like molten gold in the twilight, followed her. Their presence was not random, it was orchestrated. The lions displayed an unprecedented animal intellect. They didn't charge directly, didn't attack. Instead, they strategically fanned out, encircling the camp, cutting off the operatives' escape routes. Their movements deliberate, almost tactical. Asha locked eyes with Thabo, a deep, knowing gaze that seemed to say, "We knew. We are here." The operatives, caught completely off guard, were momentarily paralyzed by the sheer, intelligent presence of the pride. They were trained for human threats. Not this. This was an unquantifiable force of nature, Too organized, too deliberate, Thabo seized the chaotic moment. Moving with frantic precision, he disabled their communications array, ensuring no alarms could be sent. He then yanked a crucial hard drive from one of their main consoles, tucking it securely away. With trembling fingers, he activated his satellite transmitter, sending his meticulously compiled data packet hurtling into the digital ether. The confirmation beep was barely audible over the growing snarls of the Pride. The Lions' coordinated presence, their silent, intelligent blockade, was too much. The operatives, fearing for their lives, retreated in disarray, abandoning equipment, melting back into the bush. They were terrified, outmaneuvered not by Thabo, but by the very creatures they sought to exploit. The corporate cover-up was cracked open. Thabo knew his transmission would ripple outwards, exposing Ethel Resources' illegal activities to the world. As the morning sun finally broke through the canopy, illuminating the abandoned camp, Thabo realized the profound truth. Asha and her Pride weren't just protecting themselves. They were protecting him. They were the silent guardians, a living, breathing testament to the intelligence and sentience of the wild. He locked eyes with Asha one last time, her golden gaze holding an ancient wisdom. "Thank you," he whispered, the words inadequate, yet heavy with the weight of their impossible, ancient alliance, an understanding that transcended language. The reserve was scarred, a testament to human greed, but it was saved. Its future, Thabo knew, would now be guarded not just by rangers, but by the wild's own intelligent, unwavering protectors, and by a ranger forever bound by their shared secret. The true wild, it seemed, had a way of fighting back, an intelligence far deeper than any human could comprehend. The memory of that first dawn, when the warm air pressed against the windshield and the scent of wild sage filled the jeep, remained etched in Thabo's mind. He had been a man of routine, guiding his old vehicle along familiar tracks, watching the golden light burn across the savannah. But then, beyond a bend, the road had ceased to be his. Asha, deliberate and unyielding, her coat dull with dust, had stood in his path, blocking his way, her eyes holding an impossible summons. That moment of crunching gravel and shuddering silence had been the genesis of everything. What began as a single act of compassion for an injured lioness and her vulnerable cubs had spiraled into a perilous journey, unraveling a vast corporate cover-up orchestrated by Ethel Resources. The metallic fragment from Asha's wound, the chemical residue, the hidden camps. Each discovery had peeled back a layer of deceit, exposing a dangerous human intrusion, threatening to consume the wild. But in the face of such calculated treachery, a deeper, ancient alliance had been forged. Asha and her Pride, displaying unprecedented intellect, had not just received aid, they had become active participants, silent guardians. Thabo's world, once neatly defined by protocol, was now bound by an unbreakable pact with the wild. The savannah, scarred but saved, would forever bear witness to their shared secret, its future guarded by the quiet strength of its natural inhabitants and a ranger forever changed.